Hello there and welcome to Drowsy Discoveries. Tonight we'll be drifting into the ancient and timeless world of Egypt. Where the Nile once flowed slow and golden and the desert stretched endless beneath a burning sun, an entire civilization rose quietly along its banks. These were not just monuments and myths, but a living world of patient hands, sacred rituals, and quiet, lasting devotion. They built temples and tombs that have outlasted empires, standing still long after the people who raised them returned softly to the earth. Close your eyes and imagine a world before machines, before electricity, before noise, just the slow hush of wind moving over warm sand. The old stone monuments rose slowly, each block set with care, unhurried, tons of quiet ambition resting gently beneath a sky full of stars. For over 3,000 years, this world endured, worshipping the same gods beside the same river. There is something deeply calming about a story that old. But for now, there's nothing you need to do but relax. Allow yourself to get comfortable. Allow your mind to settle. And as the day begins to gently fade away, join me as we drift back in time, thousands of years, to a world unlike anything alive today. If you enjoy these journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, and drop a thought below. Let's begin. The Nile flooded every single year without fail, rising gently over its banks and leaving behind a thin, rich layer of black silt. The Egyptians called their homeland Kemet, the Black Land, named quietly for that dark and fertile soil that let wheat and barley grow along the river's winding edge. The pyramids at Giza were raised around 4,500 years ago, stones lifted slowly by patient hands. By the time Cleopatra walked the earth, those pyramids had already stood silent and ancient for longer than she could have imagined, watching empires rise and fall around them. The Great Pyramid was once wrapped in smooth, polished white limestone, casing so fine and bright that the whole structure would have glowed softly under the desert sun, almost too brilliant to look at directly. The Sphinx was never built block by block. It was carved slowly, patiently, from a single outcrop of limestone that was already resting there in the sand, shaped gently over time into a watchful guardian with a lion's body and a calm, knowing face. Hieroglyphs were known as the words of the gods. The Egyptians believed their writing carried something sacred within it, a quiet fragment of divine order, pressed carefully into stone and plaster, meant to last for all of eternity. For many centuries, no living person could read hieroglyphs at all until the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, which carried the very same message in 3 different scripts side by side, finally allowing scholars to gently unlock their hidden meaning. The Egyptians actually used 3 separate scripts depending on the moment: hieroglyphic for temples and sacred tombs, hieratic for priests and careful record-keeping, and demotic for the small, ordinary writing of everyday life. Cats were considered deeply sacred in ancient Egypt, closely tied to the gentle goddess Bastet, who was believed to watch quietly over the home, the hearth, and the safety of the family within it. Harming a cat, even by pure accident, could once bring serious punishment under Egyptian law, so deeply were these soft, watchful creatures cherished and protected by an entire civilization. Mummification was a long and careful process, often stretching across 70 slow days from beginning to end. each step performed with quiet ritual and patience. During mummification, most internal organs were gently removed and preserved separately in their own containers, but the heart was always left resting in place, believed to hold a person's intelligence, memory, and very sense of self. The brain, strangely enough to us now, was carefully drawn out through the nose using long, thin tools and simply discarded, since the Egyptians didn't believe it held any real importance at all. In the quiet halls of the afterlife, it was believed that the heart was placed gently on a scale and weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and balance, to see whether a soul deserved to pass peacefully onward. The preserved organs were stored safely inside canopic jars, each one watched over by one of the 4 sons of Horus, gentle guardians carved with the heads of a baboon, a jackal, a falcon, and a man. Pharaohs were seen as living gods walking upon the earth, a quiet bridge connecting the divine world above to the ordinary people living along the river below. Cleopatra VII, the very last pharaoh of Egypt, actually lived closer in time to the invention of the telephone than to the building of the Great Pyramid, a strange thought to rest your mind on. The Egyptians are credited with inventing some of the very earliest cosmetics known to history, including dark kohl eyeliner and the rich, soft green of crushed malachite stone. Both men and women wore eye makeup in ancient Egypt, applied with slow, practiced care, often as part of a quiet daily ritual before stepping out into the bright sun. That makeup wasn't only for beauty, it was believed to soften the harsh glare of the desert sun, and modern research suggests it may have helped gently guard against certain eye infections along the river. Wigs were common among Egyptians of nearly every class, carefully woven from human hair or soft plant fibers, worn comfortably over shaved heads to stay cool in the heat and clean in the dust. Many nobles and pharaohs shaved their heads completely, saving their most elaborate, finely braided wigs for ceremonies, festivals, and other quiet, special occasions. Bread and beer formed the gentle heart of the Egyptian diet, eaten and sipped slowly by nearly everyone, from tired farmers in the fields to pharaohs resting in golden halls. That ancient beer was thick, soft, and nourishing, almost more like a warm porridge than the thin drink we imagine today, often shared at the end of a long working day. The workers who built the pyramids were not slaves, as old stories once claimed, but paid laborers, organized carefully into skilled teams, with names like Friends of Khufu, working in shifts. Archaeologists have uncovered entire quiet villages near the pyramids, complete with bakeries, breweries, and small infirmaries, all built just to feed and care for that great patient workforce. The Egyptians loved gentle games to pass the evening, and one of the most popular was senet, played slowly on a long, narrow board marked with 30 calm little squares. Senet was believed to represent the soul's quiet journey through the afterlife, with each careful move echoing one more soft step closer toward eternity and rest. The Egyptian calendar held 365 days divided gently into 12 months of 30 days each, with 5 extra days added softly at the very end of the year. The year was split into 3 gentle seasons, the flooding, the growing, and the harvest, each one shaping the slow, steady rhythm of daily life along the river. To lift water from the Nile up into their fields, Egyptians used a simple tool called a shaduf, a long wooden lever with a bucket on one end, swinging slowly back and forth. The Egyptians were among the very first people to create a form of paper known gently as papyrus, pressed and dried beneath the sun. Papyrus was made from a tall, slender reed plant that grew thick and green along the soft banks of the Nile, harvested carefully by hand. On sheets of papyrus, Egyptians wrote tender love poems, careful medical notes, ordinary business contracts, and even simple recipes, leaving behind a quiet, lasting record of everyday life. The Edwin Smith Papyrus is one of the oldest surviving medical texts in the entire world, describing injuries and gentle treatments in remarkably careful, methodical detail. Egyptian doctors performed surgeries, set broken bones with quiet skill, and used soft honey to dress wounds, not yet knowing that honey naturally resists the growth of bacteria. The Egyptians believed the afterlife was a real, physical continuation of life itself, which is exactly why the body needed to be preserved so very carefully and completely. Tombs were filled gently with food, furniture, and small tools, everything a person might quietly need to live comfortably in the soft world that waited beyond death. The Book of the Dead was a collection of spells and quiet instructions meant to help a soul navigate safely and calmly through the long passage of the afterlife. The pharaoh Akhenaten tried to gently shift all of Egypt toward worshipping a single god, the warm sun disk known as the Aten, breaking from centuries of older tradition. His wife was Nefertiti, whose painted bust, with its calm, serene expression, remains one of the most recognized and beloved faces from the entire ancient world. In 1922, the nearly untouched tomb of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun was finally discovered by Howard Carter, its treasures resting undisturbed and silent for more than 3,000 years. Tutankhamun's burial mask was crafted from solid gold, weighing more than 10 quiet kilograms, its calm, painted eyes gazing gently out from beneath the wrappings. He died quite young, somewhere around 18 or 19 years old, and the exact, gentle cause of his passing is still softly debated by historians and scientists today. Hatshepsut was one of the very few women to rule as pharaoh in her own right, governing Egypt successfully and peacefully for about 20 calm, prosperous years. She was sometimes depicted wearing the traditional false beard of kingship, a quiet symbol meant to represent the full authority and power of the pharaoh's throne. Egyptians kept many gentle animals as beloved companions, including loyal dogs, playful monkeys, and small, colorful birds that filled their quiet homes with soft chatter. Animals were often mummified too, with cats, sacred ibises, and even crocodiles given the very same careful, patient preservation once reserved only for humans. The god Anubis, with the calm head of a jackal, was believed to gently guide each soul through the dark and into the safety of the afterlife. Thoth, depicted with the quiet head of an ibis, was the wise god of knowledge, writing, and the soft, careful keeping of records. Ra, the great sun god, was believed to sail slowly across the sky each day in a golden solar bark, gently carrying warmth and light to the waiting world below. At night, it was said Ra journeyed quietly through the underworld, calmly battling the chaos serpent Apophis in the darkness before rising again, renewed at the soft edge of dawn. To measure the slow passing of time, the Egyptians used both shadow clocks, much like sundials, and gentle water clocks that tracked the quiet drip of hour after hour. The workers' village of Deir el-Medina has left behind records of what may be one of the earliest known labor strikes in human history, workers quietly refusing to continue until they were paid. Many of the remedies used in ancient Egyptian medicine were drawn gently from plants, and some of those same quiet treatments are still studied by researchers today. Egyptians grew fields of flax in great quantities, spinning the fibers slowly into the light, breathable linen that suited their warm climate so perfectly well. Linen was cool and gentle against the skin, the soft fabric of choice for nearly everyone living quietly along the banks of the Nile. Wealthier Egyptians wore beautifully pleated linen garments, the soft folds pressed carefully by hand and worn with quiet, practiced elegance. Egyptian jewelry often featured the small scarab beetle, a gentle symbol of rebirth, renewal, and the quiet promise of beginning again. The scarab was closely connected to the god Khepri, who was believed to slowly push the sun across the sky each calm morning, much like a beetle rolling its ball. Gold was abundant in Egypt and was thought to be the very flesh of the gods, eternal, warm, and untarnishing, no matter how many centuries passed quietly by. Egyptians traded patiently across great distances, exchanging goods with Nubia to the south, the Levant to the east, and the distant, mysterious land of Punt. One famous expedition to Punt returned with fragrant incense, gold, ivory, and even living trees carried slowly and carefully home by ship across calm waters. Egyptian boats were often built without a single nail, the wooden planks gently lashed together with rope instead, flexing softly with the river's quiet current. Solar boats were sometimes buried near royal tombs, meant to carry the pharaoh's spirit calmly across the sky and through the heavens after death. Near the Great Pyramid, archaeologists found the dismantled pieces of King Khufu's actual ship, resting quietly in a hidden pit for thousands of years before being carefully reassembled. The Nile's yearly flood was gently honored through the god Hapi, who represented abundance, renewal, and the soft promise of another good harvest to come. The Egyptians had no symbol for zero, yet they used fractions with quiet skill, almost always expressing them gently as sums of single, simple unit fractions. To build with such remarkable precision, architects relied on simple tools, plumb bobs swinging gently on their strings, set squares, and long ropes stretched carefully for measuring straight lines. The pyramids were aligned with astonishing accuracy to the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west, a quiet feat of patient observation and careful planning. Pyramid workers lived in organized villages equipped with bakeries, breweries, and even small places of medical care for the tired and the injured among them. Detailed tax records like the Wilbur Papyrus show just how carefully and patiently Egyptian land and harvests were measured, recorded, and quietly accounted for. Children in ancient Egypt played gently with dolls, soft balls, and small toy animals carved from wood, much like children almost anywhere across time. Some of those old toys had moving parts, like little wooden crocodiles whose painted jaws could snap softly open and shut on a hidden string. Music filled Egyptian life quietly, played on harps, lutes, gentle flutes, and the soft, rhythmic rattle of the sistrum at festivals and quiet evening gatherings. The sistrum was especially sacred to Hathor, the warm goddess of love, music, and motherhood. Her presence felt softly in every gentle shake of the instrument. Hathor was often shown as a calm cow or as a woman wearing gentle cow's horns, nurturing and soft in every depiction left behind. Egyptians celebrated many festivals with feasting, music, and dancing that could continue softly for days at a time, the whole community resting together in celebration. The Opet festival held at the great temple of Karnak quietly celebrated the divine nature of kingship itself, a slow procession moving gently along the river. Temples were considered the calm homes of the gods, quiet, sacred spaces meant for priests rather than places of loud public gathering. Ordinary people worshipped instead at small, simple home shrines, keeping gentle amulets close by for comfort, protection, and quiet peace of mind. The Ankh, a soft symbol shaped like a looped cross, represented life itself and was worn often as a small charm close to the heart. The Eye of Horus was another beloved amulet believed to offer gentle protection, healing, and lasting good health to whoever carried it quietly with them. The pharaoh's crown combined the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt into a single, calm symbol of unity. This double crown, called the Pshent, represented the peaceful joining of the two lands of Egypt into one quiet, unified kingdom. Egypt was first unified around 3,100 years before our time, under a ruler known softly as Nama, his name carried gently down through history. The Nama palette, which records this early unification, is one of the oldest historical artifacts ever found, its carvings still calm and legible after so many centuries. Before the pyramids, Egyptians built flat-roofed tombs called mastabas, the gentle, quiet ancestors of the grander shapes that would slowly follow. The step pyramid of Djoser, designed by the architect Imhotep, was the very first of its kind in the whole world, rising gently in layered stone. Imhotep was so deeply respected for his quiet genius that he was later worshipped as a god of medicine and architecture long after his own peaceful death. The Valley of the Kings became the resting place for many pharaohs during the New Kingdom, tucked gently away in quiet desert cliffs far from prying eyes. Tomb walls were painted softly with vivid scenes of God's daily life and the long, calm journey into the afterlife, colors still glowing faintly after thousands of years. Painters used natural mineral pigments, warm ochre for earthy tones, soft malachite for green, and rare blue stones ground gently for painting the sky. Egyptian blue is considered the very first synthetic pigment ever created by human hands, mixed slowly and carefully from sand, copper, and quiet patience. Everyday notes, gentle sketches, and small personal messages were often written on broken pieces of pottery called ostraca, quick scraps of quiet daily thought. Many labourers could read and write well enough to leave behind their own small, personal notes and doodles, quiet traces of individual lives. Cleopatra was known to speak several languages fluently, and unlike many of her Greek ancestors before her, she reportedly took the time to gently learn Egyptian itself. The Great Library of Alexandria became one of the most remarkable quiet centers of learning in the entire ancient world, its scrolls gathered from every corner of the known earth. To track the Nile's gentle rise each year, Egyptians built nilometers, simple stepped structures used to softly measure the river's slow and steady flood. The Egyptians believed the soul held several quiet parts, including the ka, a person's life force, and the bae, their unique personality, both needing the preserved body to be made whole again in the calm hereafter. Egyptians made an early form of toothpaste, grinding together crushed ox hooves, fine ash, and burnt eggshells, sometimes mixed with a little pumice to gently scrub the teeth clean. Despite that careful effort, Egyptian teeth often wore down badly over a lifetime, since tiny grains of sand from the desert would quietly work their way into every loaf of bread. Egyptian women held remarkably strong legal rights for their time, able to own property in their own name, run small businesses, and even initiate a divorce if they chose to. Marriage in ancient Egypt was a quiet private matter, more of a simple agreement between two families than any grand religious or state ceremony. While pharaohs and royalty sometimes had several wives, most ordinary Egyptians lived simply and quietly, with just one partner throughout their lives. Egyptian homes were built from mud brick, thick walls that stayed cool inside, even as the desert sun blazed softly overhead all afternoon. In the evenings, families would often climb up to their flat rooftops, resting there together in the cool night air, long after the heat of the day had faded. Windows were kept small and set high on the walls, a gentle way of keeping out both the harsh sun and the drifting desert sand. Wealthier Egyptians kept beautiful private gardens with calm, reflecting pools, shady sycamore trees, and date palms swaying softly, a quiet symbol of comfort and status. Geese and ducks were carefully raised for food, waddling gently around courtyards and providing eggs and meat for the household table. Fish like Nile perch and tilapia were caught from the river and dried slowly in the sun, preserved for the long, quiet months when fresh food was harder to find. Some animals were believed to be living manifestations of the gods themselves, like the sacred Apis bull, who was thought to embody the spirit of the god Ptah. The Mnevis bull was honored in a similar way, believed to be a living, breathing connection to the great sun god Ra. These sacred animals were sometimes given burials more elaborate and costly than those of ordinary humans, laid to rest in their own quiet, decorated tombs. Egyptian women could rise to become priestesses, especially in service to gentle goddesses like Hathor, leading rituals and music within the temple walls. Priests practiced careful purification rituals, shaving all the hair from their bodies and bathing several times a day to remain spiritually clean before the gods. Temple service was often organized in quiet, rotating shifts, with priests serving for about 1 month at a time before resting and returning home. The pharaoh Ramesses II reigned for an astonishing 66 years, one of the longest reigns in all of ancient history, watching generations pass slowly by. Ramesses II commissioned the great temples of Abu Simbel, carved directly into a mountainside, their massive seated statues gazing calmly out over the water. Twice each year, sunlight travels deep into the inner sanctuary at Abu Simbel, gently illuminating the statues seated quietly within, a moment of perfect ancient alignment. The Battle of Kadesh, fought between Rameses II and the Hittites, is one of the earliest battles in history recorded in such rich and careful detail. The peace treaty that followed the Battle of Kadesh is considered one of the oldest known peace treaties in the entire world, carved patiently into temple walls. Egyptians cleaned their teeth with frayed twigs as well, a simple early form of toothbrush, the soft, fibrous end gently worked between the teeth each morning. Garlic and onions were grown widely and believed to carry real health benefits, their dried bulbs often placed thoughtfully inside tombs to accompany the dead. In a few unusual cases, onions were even placed gently into the eye sockets of mummies, perhaps believed to help restore sight in the next world. Grapes were grown carefully in the Nile Delta and pressed into wine, which was then sealed in clay jars marked with helpful little labels. Those wine jars were stamped with mud seals noting the vineyard, the harvest year, and even a quiet quality grade, an early and surprisingly careful labeling system. Beekeeping was practiced gently across Egypt, with honey used not only as a sweetener, but also as medicine and as a quiet offering to the gods. In some old myths, bees were said to have formed from the very tears of the god Ra as they fell softly to the earth below. Egyptians raised tall, slender obelisks, each one a single shaft of stone symbolizing a frozen ray of sunlight, often capped at the top with gleaming gold. Many of these ancient obelisks were later carried far from home, now resting quietly in Rome, Paris, London, and even New York City. Moving such enormous stones required floating them slowly down the Nile on sturdy wooden barges, a careful, patient journey across the calm water. At Aswan, workers quarried hard granite, using nothing but heavy balls of dolerite stone, pounding patiently for months without the help of any iron tools. The unfinished obelisk still rests at Aswan today, cracked before it could ever be completed, offering a quiet window into the ancient methods of stone cutting. Egyptians traveled into the Sinai to mine turquoise and copper, carrying these treasures slowly back across the desert to workshops along the Nile. Egyptian faience, a smooth glazed material, was shaped gently into beads, amulets, and small delicate figures, fired carefully until it gleamed. That faience was very often a soft blue-green color, quietly evoking both the life-giving Nile and the gentle promise of rebirth. Sandals were woven from papyrus reeds or cut from soft leather, simple footwear that many Egyptians treasured as a small luxury. Many ordinary Egyptians, especially the poorer farmers, simply went barefoot through most of their daily lives, the warm earth familiar beneath their feet. Long before Senet became popular, Egyptians played a game called Mehen, the snake game, its board coiled gently like a resting serpent. Hounds and Jackals was another beloved old board game, its pieces carved like small animals, discovered resting quietly inside ancient tombs. The Egyptian New Year was tied gently to the star Sirius, whose return to the dawn sky each year was believed to signal the coming flood. Watching for that quiet rising of Sirius helped Egyptian priests predict, with surprising accuracy, just when the life-giving Nile flood would soon arrive. Because the calendar never adjusted for leap years, it slowly drifted out of step with the true seasons over the span of many patient centuries. Egyptian scribes were treated with great respect, having spent long years training carefully in the art of careful, beautiful writing. Scribal schools welcomed students at a young age, teaching them patiently through long days of careful copying, though discipline could be quite strict. For a clever commoner, becoming a scribe offered a rare and welcome path toward a more comfortable, secure life. Egyptian numbers were not written in the positional system we use today, but instead used separate, distinct symbols for tens, hundreds, and thousands. Egyptian multiplication was done through a gentle method of doubling and adding, breaking each problem down into small, simple, repeated steps. Beyond the simple shadaf, Egyptians built networks of quiet canals and earthen dikes to guide the Nile's water gently across their fields. Egyptian farmers grew flax, wheat, barley, lettuce, cucumbers, sweet dates, soft figs, and ripe pomegranates, a rich and varied harvest along the riverbanks. Lettuce held a special place in Egyptian belief, closely associated with Min, the god of fertility and the harvest. Offerings of wine and beer were poured out regularly for the gods, a quiet gesture of gratitude repeated again and again through the centuries. Some tombs were carved with false doors, a symbolic threshold meant to let the soul of the deceased pass gently between the worlds. Statues of the dead, called Ka statues, were placed carefully inside tombs to serve as a resting place for the spirit if the mummy itself were ever harmed. A quiet ceremony called the opening of the mouth was performed on mummies and statues alike, meant to restore their senses, their breath, and their voice. Professional mourners were sometimes hired for funerals, their soft, practiced wailing rising and falling gently as the procession moved slowly along. Funeral processions often included priests wearing the calm jackal mask of Anubis, walking solemnly beside the coffin toward its final resting place. Egyptian craftsmen specialized narrowly in their trade, with carpenters, jewelers, sculptors, and leatherworkers each quietly perfecting their own particular skill. Workers were usually paid in grain, beer, and other useful goods rather than coins, since coinage did not arrive in Egypt until many centuries later. Small figurines called shabtis were placed inside tombs, believed to spring to life in the afterlife and perform any labor required on the deceased's behalf. Some especially wealthy tombs held hundreds of shabtis, often one for every day of the year, along with a few quiet overseer figures to direct them. According to old accounts, Egyptian doctors sometimes specialized by body part, with one quietly treating only eyes, another only teeth, each devoted to a single craft. Illness was often believed to come from angry spirits or unclean substances resting within the body, something to be coaxed gently back into balance. Magic and medicine were closely woven together in Egypt, with quiet spells often recited softly alongside any physical remedy or treatment. Egyptians kept careful books on dream interpretation, gentle guides meant to help make sense of the images that drifted through sleep. Some Egyptians believed dreams could carry real meaning from the gods and would sleep quietly inside temples, hoping for a guiding vision in the night. wisdom texts like the instructions of Ptah-hotep offered gentle moral guidance, teaching patience, honesty, and kindness to each new generation. Egyptian love poetry was surprisingly tender and personal, comparing a beloved softly to a flower, a bird, or the cool, gentle Nile itself. The tale of Sinuhe remains one of the most beautiful pieces of ancient Egyptian literature, a quiet story of exile, longing, and eventual return home. That same story was copied so often by young scribes in training that it survives today in many careful, patient, handwritten versions. The tale of the shipwrecked sailor is considered one of the earliest known fantasy stories in the world, drifting gently between the real and the magical. The Westcar Papyrus preserves a set of quiet old stories about magic, said to have been told for the entertainment of King Khufu himself. During the Feast of the Valley held at Deir el-Bahri, families gathered to honor and remember their departed ancestors with quiet reverence. Offering tables and carved stelae were left at tombs, gentle invitations for living relatives to return and bring fresh food for the dead. Families would sometimes picnic quietly beside the tombs of loved ones during festivals, sharing a meal together across the soft boundary between life and death. Beyond the Ka and the Ba, Egyptians believed in the Ak, a fully transfigured and blessed spirit, settled calmly into its eternal place. The falcon was closely tied to Horus, the god of kingship, and the wide, watchful sky above. Wadjet, the gentle cobra goddess, was believed to protect the pharaoh, her coiled image resting calmly at the front of the royal crown. Nekbet, a protective vulture goddess, stood beside Wadjet, the two together, known softly as the Two Ladies, guardians of the king. Egyptian temples were entered through massive stone gateways called pylons, their towering walls carved with quiet scenes of great battles and triumphant kings. Inside, temple walls also recorded peaceful treaties, gentle hymns, and long lists of kings, a quiet record carved to last forever. The Karnak temple complex grew slowly into one of the largest religious sites ever built, expanded patiently by different pharaohs over more than 2,000 years. The hypostyle hall at Karnak holds 134 massive stone columns, rising calmly like a quiet forest of carved pillars. Luxor Temple was once connected to Karnak by a long avenue lined gently with rows of stone sphinxes, a quiet path for sacred processions. The Colossi of Memnon, two enormous stone statues, were said in ancient times to softly sing at dawn, a strange and gentle sound caused by hidden cracks in the stone. Mortuary temples were built apart from the tombs themselves, quiet places where priests could continue honoring a pharaoh's spirit long after burial. Embalmers used natron, a natural salt drawn from dry lake beds, to gently dry out the body during the long mummification process. Once the organs were removed, bodies were carefully packed with linen and soft sawdust to help maintain their familiar shape. Mummification itself could differ greatly by social class, with the wealthy receiving an elaborate, lengthy process, while the poor were given a simpler, gentler salting and drying. Animal worship grew especially strong in Egypt's later periods, with massive shared animal cemeteries like the quiet ibis catacombs resting beneath Saqqara. Ordinary homes were built from simple mud bricks dried slowly in the sun, a humble and affordable alternative to costly carved stone. Egyptians built tall granaries to store surplus grain safely, a quiet safeguard against the lean, uncertain years when famine might come. The famine Stela describes a terrible 7-year famine, a story that echoes gently with similar tales remembered in other ancient traditions. The instruction of Amenemope offered careful wisdom and moral guidance, and its calm teachings quietly influenced wisdom literature in other cultures far beyond Egypt. Egyptian physicians understood the importance of the pulse, recognizing a quiet connection between the heart and the vessels running throughout the body. Surgical tools made of copper and bronze have been found carved into temple walls at Kom Ombo, a quiet record of careful, ancient medical practice. Egyptians cultivated the castor oil plant, pressing its oil gently for use in lamps and as a soothing treatment for the skin. Along the Nile, simple beacons and markers helped guide boats safely through the dark, a gentle forerunner to the great lighthouses still to come. In the Egyptian afterlife, souls were believed to cross into the field of reeds, a calm and gentle paradise mirroring the beauty of earthly life, but free from all suffering. And so the river rests now, quiet beneath the stars, carrying these old and gentle stories softly, softly into your sleep. Long before the pyramids at Giza, the pharaoh Sneferu built 3 pyramids during his own reign, slowly learning and adjusting his methods with each one. One of Sneferu's pyramids, the bent pyramid, actually changes angle partway up its sides, a quiet sign that builders changed their plan midway for safety. Sneferu's other great structure, the Red Pyramid, is named gently for the soft, reddish hue of its limestone, glowing warmly in the evening light. The second pyramid at Giza was built for the pharaoh Khafra, and some historians believe his face may have gently inspired the calm features of the Sphinx. The smallest of the 3 Giza pyramids belonged to Menkaure, resting quietly beside the grander monuments of his father and grandfather. Each great pyramid at Giza was accompanied by smaller, quieter pyramids built for queens, resting gently nearby like soft echoes of the larger structures. Long stone causeways once connected each pyramid to a valley temple by the Nile, a slow, covered path used during the pharaoh's funeral procession. Inside the Great Pyramid, narrow relieving chambers were built above the burial room, and ancient workers left behind faint painted marks naming their work gangs. 9. Those work gangs carried playful, proud names like the Friends of Khufu, a quiet reminder of the pride workers felt in their labor. The passage leading up into the Great Pyramid opens into the Grand Gallery, a tall, narrow corridor that rises gently at a steep, deliberate angle. Pharaoh Thutmose III led many military campaigns across the ancient world, and historians sometimes gently nickname him the Napoleon of Egypt. His victory at the Battle of Megiddo is one of the earliest battles in history recorded with detailed, careful military strategy. Pharaoh Amenhotep III oversaw an era of extraordinary peace and building, raising temples and statues across the length of Egypt. His wife, Queen Tiye, was a powerful and deeply respected figure. Her influence felt quietly throughout the royal court. The pharaoh Akhenaten built an entirely new capital city at Amarna, devoted softly to the worship of his single god, the Aten. Amarna's buildings were made from small, easily stacked stone blocks called talatat, allowing the city to rise with unusual speed. After Akhenaten's death, the city of Amarna was slowly abandoned, its temples and palaces left quiet beneath the drifting desert sand. To protect royal mummies from ancient tomb robbers, priests once gathered many pharaohs together and hid them quietly in a single secret cache. That hidden royal cache lay undisturbed for thousands of years before it was gently rediscovered near Deir el-Bahri in the 19th century. Pharaoh Seti I built a beautiful temple at Abydos, its painted reliefs among the most delicately carved in all of Egypt. His son, Ramesses II, completed much of his father's unfinished work, continuing the careful craftsmanship with quiet devotion. Ramesses II's beloved wife, Nefertari, was honored with her own stunning tomb in the Valley of the Queens, its walls glowing with soft color. A smaller temple at Abu Simbel was dedicated gently to Nefertari herself, a rare honor for a queen in ancient Egypt. The god Osiris was believed to have once ruled Egypt as a wise and gentle king before being betrayed by his brother Set. After Osiris was killed, his devoted wife Isis searched patiently and gathered his scattered remains, performing the very first mummification in Egyptian myth. Isis was honored as a powerful goddess of magic and healing, her quiet devotion to Osiris becoming one of Egypt's most beloved stories. Their son, Horus, grew up to challenge his uncle Set for the throne, a long mythic struggle between order and chaos. Osiris himself became ruler of the afterlife, welcoming each soul gently into the quiet realm beyond death. The god Sobek, with the head of a crocodile, was worshipped especially at the temple of Kom Ombo along the Nile. Sacred crocodiles were sometimes kept in temple pools, gently adorned with golden earrings and bracelets in honor of Sobek. The goddess Sekhmet, depicted with the head of a lioness, was believed to protect Egypt fiercely, while also healing the sick. The dwarf god Bes was a beloved household protector, his playful, friendly image kept close to guard children and new mothers. The hippopotamus goddess Taweret was honored in much the same gentle way, watching tenderly over pregnant women and new births. Women in labor were sometimes given small amulets shaped like Bez or Taweret, tucked close for comfort and quiet protection. Egyptian birth bricks used to support a mother during childbirth were sometimes painted with protective images of these same gentle gods. The god Geb represented the earth itself, often shown lying calmly beneath his sister and wife, Nut, the goddess of the sky. Nut was believed to arch gracefully over the world each night, her body scattered softly with stars, swallowing the sun at dusk and releasing it again at dawn. The air god Shu was said to gently hold his children Geb and Nut apart, keeping earth and sky forever separated by a calm, steady breath. In the ancient city of Heliopolis, priests told a quiet creation story centered on the sun god Atum, who rose from formless waters to bring the world into being. In Hermopolis, a different and equally old creation myth told of 8 primeval gods paired gently together, shaping existence out of darkness and chaos. At Memphis, priests honored Ptah as a creator god who simply spoke the world into existence through the quiet power of thought and word. The Waz scepter, topped with a curious forked base, was carried by gods and pharaohs alike as a calm symbol of power and dominion. The Djed pillar represented stability and endurance, said to echo the gentle shape of Osiris's own backbone. The Tayet knot, sometimes called the Knot of Isis, was worn as a protective amulet, closely linked to the goddess's healing magic. The Shen ring, a simple loop of rope tied at one end, quietly symbolized eternity, infinity, and the endless cycle of the sun. At banquets, wealthy Egyptians sometimes wore small cones of scented fat atop their wigs, which slowly melted through the evening, releasing a soft, lingering fragrance. Lotus flowers were often handed gently to guests at feasts, their sweet scent and soft petals symbolizing rebirth and quiet pleasure. Egyptians practiced careful manicures and pedicures, and traces of henna have been found staining the nails of several ancient mummies. The mummy of Rameses II was found to have hair tinted with henna, a soft, reddish hue preserved gently across thousands of years. Egyptians commonly removed body hair for comfort and cleanliness, using bronze razors and tweezers crafted carefully for the task. Fine-toothed combs have been discovered in Egyptian tombs, sometimes still carrying the faint, quiet evidence of head lice from daily ancient life. Bathing in the Nile was a normal part of daily life, and Egyptian children were taught to swim from a very young age. The concept of Ma'at extended far beyond simple truth, representing the entire cosmic balance and order that kept the universe calmly in place. Egyptian judges were sometimes called priests of Ma'at, expected to rule with the same calm fairness, believed to hold the whole world together. 55. Local councils known as Kenbet handled everyday disputes, gently settling disagreements over land, debts, or family matters within each community. Tomb robbery was treated as an extremely serious crime, and surviving trial records describe harsh punishments handed down to those who were caught. Egyptian glassmaking dates back over 3,000 years, with colourful glass beads and small vessels shaped patiently by skilled, careful hands. Some of the earliest Egyptian iron objects were made from meteoric iron fallen quietly from the sky and worked into rare, precious tools. Egyptians referred to this rare iron with a phrase that gently translates to iron of the sky, recognizing its strange and wondrous origin. A small dagger found in Tutankhamun's tomb was crafted from this same meteoric iron untouched by rust for more than 3,000 years. Egyptian nights were divided into 12 hours, each one marked gently by the rising of a particular group of stars called a deacon. Because of this system, the length of an hour quietly shifted with the seasons, stretching longer in winter and shorter through the heat of summer. At the Temple of Dendera, a beautifully carved ceiling depicts a detailed zodiac, a quiet map of the stars as the Egyptians understood them. Hatshepsut's mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri rises in calm, graceful terraces connected by long ramps that climb gently up the cliffside. During the Second Intermediate Period, a foreign people known as the Hyksos settled in the Nile Delta and ruled over northern Egypt for a time. The pharaohs Kamose and Amose eventually led campaigns to gently push the Hyksos out, reuniting Egypt once more under native rule. Centuries later, kings from Nubia conquered Egypt and ruled as its pharaohs, founding what historians now call the 25th dynasty. One of these Nubian pharaohs, Paye, was deeply devoted to Egyptian religious tradition, restoring temples with quiet care and reverence. Another Nubian ruler, Taharqa, built extensively throughout Egypt, leaving behind monuments that blended Egyptian and Nubian artistic styles. Further south, the Nubian kingdom of Meroe built its own pyramids, smaller and steeper than Egypt's, rising gently against the desert horizon. Egyptian traders exchanged goods with the Minoans of Crete and other Aegean peoples, sending pottery, gold and ideas slowly back and forth across the sea. The soft blue lotus flower carried deep symbolic meaning in Egyptian art, often shown gently opening to represent the sun and the act of creation. Papyrus thickets, painted often in tomb scenes, represented the quiet, marshy edges of the Nile where birds nested and fish swam in shallow water. Egyptian artists followed a careful grid system to keep the human body in calm, consistent proportion across paintings and carvings. Figures in Egyptian art were almost always shown with their torso facing forward and their face turned gently to the side. A quiet, artistic convention followed for centuries. Important figures like pharaohs and gods were often drawn larger than everyone else nearby, a technique historians call hierarchy of scale. During the reign of Akhenaten, Egyptian art briefly grew softer and more natural, with bodies shown in a more relaxed, flowing style. The Ipuwer papyrus describes a time of chaos and upheaval in Egypt, a poetic lament some have compared gently to other ancient stories of disaster. Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BCE, welcomed by many as a liberator rather than a foreign invader. After Alexander's death, his general Ptolemy took control of Egypt, founding the Ptolemaic dynasty that would rule for centuries. Under Ptolemaic rule, Alexandria grew into a magnificent, cosmopolitan capital filled with scholars, sailors, and merchants from across the ancient world. The great lighthouse of Alexandria, known as the Pharos, was considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, guiding ships safely toward the harbor. At night, a fire burning atop the Pharos was reflected outward by a great polished mirror, its light visible from many miles out at sea. The Mouseion in Alexandria functioned much like a quiet research institute, drawing brilliant scholars together to study, write, and gently debate. The mathematician Eratosthenes worked in Alexandria and calculated the circumference of the Earth with remarkable accuracy, using only shadows and careful geometry. The Ramesseum, Ramesses II's grand mortuary temple, once held an enormous seated statue of the pharaoh, much of it now resting quietly in pieces. That same fallen statue later inspired poets and travelers who wandered thoughtfully among its broken stones, struck by the quiet passage of time. The mortuary temple of Ramesses III at Medinet Habu remains remarkably well preserved, its painted colours still soft and visible today. The Temple of Horus at Edfu is one of the best preserved temples in all of Egypt, its walls carved with detailed religious scenes. At Philae, a graceful temple dedicated to Isis was later moved, stone by careful stone, to a nearby island to save it from rising waters. Egyptian perfume making relied on gently infusing oils with flowers, resins, and spices, a slow, fragrant process treasured by the wealthy. Incense was burned generously in temples, its soft, fragrant smoke believed to carry prayers gently upward toward the waiting gods. Egyptians gave special meaning to colour in their art, with green representing fresh growth and rebirth, and gold representing the eternal flesh of the gods. Black, surprisingly, was often associated with the rich, fertile soil of the Nile, a colour of life rather than darkness or mourning. White was closely tied to purity and sacredness, worn often by priests as they moved quietly through their temple duties. The much later historian Manetho organized Egypt's long history into a sequence of numbered dynasties, a system historians still gently rely on today. Egyptian wet nurses were sometimes hired to help feed and raise royal children, a trusted and quietly respected role within the palace. Children were usually named soon after birth, often chosen to honor a god, a hoped-for trait, or a beloved family member. Egyptian fishermen used woven reed boats as well as wooden ones, gliding quietly across the Nile's calm surface in search of the day's catch. The Egyptian week was made up of 10 quiet days rather than 7, with workers usually resting gently for 1 or 2 days at the very end of each cycle. The true source of the Nile was a complete mystery to the ancient Egyptians, who believed the river surged softly up from hidden caverns deep beneath the rocks at Aswan. The god Hapi was imagined dwelling peacefully inside those same caverns, gently controlling the rise and fall of the flood from his quiet, underground home. Egypt was traditionally seen as 2 separate lands joined as one. Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north, calmly united beneath a single crown. The sedge plant quietly symbolized Upper Egypt, while the small honeybee represented Lower Egypt, the two woven gently together within the pharaoh's many royal titles. Each pharaoh held 5 separate formal names in total, a long and careful titulary meant to proclaim every gentle aspect of his rule. Royal names were enclosed within an oval loop called a cartouche, a soft protective boundary meant to guard the name for all of eternity. Hieroglyphs could be written in calm rows or quiet columns, moving either left to right or right to left, with carved figures always facing toward the direction of reading. Many hieroglyphic words carried a small silent symbol called a determinative, a gentle visual clue added only to clarify meaning, never meant to be spoken aloud. Grain across Egypt was measured using a unit called a hecat, a quiet but essential tool for fair taxation and the steady distribution of food. Length was measured using the royal cubit, a carefully kept rod treated as an official, unchanging standard across the whole kingdom. Weight, meanwhile, was measured in daben, a unit used patiently for trading valuable metals like copper, silver, and gold. For most of its long history, Egypt had no coins at all, and trade instead relied on careful, quiet bartering between neighbours and merchants. A clever old text called The Satire of the Trades humorously praised the comfortable life of a scribe over the harsh, tiring labour of other trades. The instruction of any offered gentle fatherly advice about household harmony, simple courtesy, and quiet respect for one's parents. Young scribes practiced their lessons using onomastica, long lists of words sorted calmly by category, almost like an early, gentle dictionary. Egyptian music was passed down quietly by ear from one generation to the next, since no system of written musical notation has ever survived. Skilled dancers performed at temples and festive banquets, their slow, graceful movements sometimes turning surprisingly acrobatic and athletic. Tomb paintings at Beni Hassan show wrestlers locked together in dozens of carefully illustrated holds, a quiet, detailed record of ancient sport. Hunting scenes were common in tomb art, often showing a man standing calmly in a papyrus boat, throwing sticks gently toward rising marsh birds. These quiet fowling scenes often included a hunter's family gathered nearby, watching softly as the startled birds lifted from the reeds. Desert hunts for swift gazelle and graceful oryx were also popular among Egyptian nobility, proudly recorded across many tomb walls. Priests, known as sem-priests, wore a leopard skin draped gently over one shoulder while performing solemn funerary ceremonies. Priestesses, called Hesets, sang softly and played music during temple rituals, honoring the gods with calm, gentle melody. Temples controlled enormous estates of farmland, granaries, and livestock, quietly becoming some of the wealthiest and most powerful institutions in all of Egypt. A single major temple could employ thousands of people, its stored grain gently supporting entire towns through difficult, uncertain years. The pyramid texts, carved softly inside the pyramid of King Unas, are counted among the very oldest religious writings found anywhere in the world. Later, similar protective spells were painted gently inside wooden coffins, a tradition scholars now quietly refer to as the coffin texts. The Book of the Amduat described the sun god's long nightly journey through 12 calm hours of the underworld, moving steadily toward dawn. The Book of Gates imagined the underworld as a slow series of guarded doorways, each one a quiet test the soul needed to pass through. Egyptian fortresses were built deep within Nubia, including the strongholds of Buhan and Semna, standing watch gently over the southern frontier. These quiet desert fortresses protected valuable trade routes that carried gold, ivory, and ebony steadily north into the heart of Egypt. Hatshepsut once sent a grand expedition to the distant land of Punt, and the ships returned carrying living myrrh trees, their roots wrapped with great care. Those same Punt myrrh trees were planted gently in the courtyards of Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahri, a soft, fragrant memory of that long voyage. Egyptian beds were often raised on short legs, carved to resemble animal paws, lifting the sleeper calmly above scorpions and other small nighttime creatures. Rather than soft pillows, Egyptians rested their heads gently on curved headrests carved from wood or smooth stone. Chairs and stools were common furniture in Egyptian homes, with the finest examples inlaid delicately with ivory, ebony, or thin gold leaf. Egyptian carpenters joined their wood using wooden pegs and careful dovetail joints, since metal nails remained rare and precious. Fine cedar wood was imported gently from Byblos in what is now Lebanon, prized for shipbuilding and for the finest royal coffins. Egyptian mirrors were not made of glass but of polished bronze or copper, reflecting back a soft, dim, gently wavering image. Cosmetic containers were sometimes carved into delicate shapes, like a quiet young swimmer gently holding out a small dish. Egyptian men typically wore a simple wrapped kilt called a shenty, light and breathable in the steady heat of the day. Egyptian women wore long, simple sheath dresses, often made from finely pleated linen that moved softly with every step. In royal portraits, pharaohs carried a crook and flail, gentle symbols representing both their care for the people and their quiet authority over the land. The striped blue and gold Nimes headcloth remains one of the most recognizable parts of royal pharaonic dress, calm and dignified in every carving. The cobra-shaped uraeus resting on the crown was believed to spit protective fire at any enemy who dared threaten the king. Egyptian doctors crafted some of the earliest known prosthetics, including a gentle wooden and leather toe carefully fitted to a mummy's foot. That ancient prosthetic toe shows quiet signs of wear, suggesting it may have truly helped its owner walk a little more comfortably each day. Egyptian glassmakers shaped small, colourful vessels by slowly trailing molten glass around a soft core of sand and clay. Bright glass beads were strung gently into necklaces, collars and bracelets worn by Egyptians across many different levels of society. Bread was baked in countless shapes and sizes, some moulds carved softly to resemble small animals or simple, delicate flowers. Brewers sometimes added sweet dates or honey to their beer, gently enriching the drink for wealthier households and special occasions. Egyptian granaries were managed with quiet, careful precision by scribes who recorded exactly how much grain moved in and out of each storeroom. Surplus grain kept safely in temple, and royal granaries helped support the kingdom gently through years when the Nile's flood ran unusually low. Simple reed boats of early Egypt were gradually joined by larger wooden ships, though papyrus boats remained common and beloved for everyday fishing. Certain fish were considered unsuitable for some priests to eat, a quiet dietary rule tied closely to local religious tradition. Beyond the famous mines of the Sinai, Egyptian copper was also drawn gently from mines at Timnah, far to the east. The goddess Neith was honored as a calm guardian deity, linked at different times to weaving, hunting, and the careful arts of war. Selket, shown wearing a small scorpion upon her head, was called upon gently to protect against dangerous stings and bites. The cobra goddess Renenutet watched softly over the harvest, her image placed near granaries and quiet, threshing floors each season. Heka, the god of magic itself, was believed to have been present at the very first moment of creation, woven into existence itself. Shay represented a person's fate or destiny, a quiet, constant companion present gently from the moment of birth onward. Meskenet, goddess of childbirth, was believed to attend every birth, shaping a child's future softly from their very first breath. Nephthys, sister of Isis, helped mourn and protect the dead, often shown standing quiet watch at the foot of a coffin. The falcon-headed god, Montu, was honored in Thebes as a fierce protector and god of war. His presence felt strongly in that ancient city. Mut, whose very name means mother, was honored as a powerful queen among the gods, standing gently beside her husband Amun. Their son Khonsu, a soft and gentle moon god, completed the beloved divine family worshipped quietly throughout Thebes. Amun-Ra, blending the hidden god Amun with the visible sun god Ra, slowly grew into one of the most powerful deities in the whole Egyptian pantheon. The fierce lion-headed god Mahis was honored as a protector, his worship closely tied to the city of Bubastis. Bubastis itself became a major center for the worship of the gentle cat goddess Bastet, drawing crowds of pilgrims for her joyful yearly festival. At Tanis in the marshy Nile delta, archaeologists later uncovered royal tombs nearly as rich as Tutankhamun's, though far less widely known. The island city of Elephantine near Aswan was considered a sacred boundary, quietly marking the southern edge of ancient Egypt itself. Senusret III is remembered as a strong Middle Kingdom ruler, his portraits carved with unusually careful, weary realism, rarely seen elsewhere. Amenemhat I founded an entirely new royal dynasty, gently shifting Egypt's capital to a fresh location closer to the river. The pyramid of King Unas at Saqqara, though far smaller than those at Giza, quietly holds some of the oldest religious texts ever carved into stone. Pepi II is remembered for an unusually long reign, said to have stretched gently from his childhood years all the way into old age. Tomb robbery cases were carefully recorded in documents like the Abbott Papyrus, describing slow, methodical investigations into stolen royal treasures. The Leopold II and Amherst papyri preserve further accounts of trials held against those caught quietly defiling sacred burial grounds. The Turin papyri, found at Deir el-Medina, recorded workers' wages, absences, and even the gentle reasons given for missing a day of labor. Workers sometimes listed soft, ordinary excuses for their absence, like caring for a sick relative or simply not feeling well that day. A popular old board game called 20 Squares was closely related to Senet, played gently on a shorter, simpler board. Egyptian temples sometimes kept exotic animals brought from distant lands, including playful monkeys and even tall, gentle giraffes from the south. Hunting parties occasionally captured these unusual animals alive, presenting them proudly to the pharaoh as rare and treasured gifts. Coptic, a later form of the Egyptian language written with Greek letters, slowly grew from the very same speech once spoken by the pharaohs. Even today, some Coptic Christian prayers quietly preserve faint echoes of words first spoken in the age of ancient Egypt. The tomb of Seti I, deep within the Valley of the Kings, stretches further underground than almost any other royal tomb ever found. Tomb KV5, one of the largest tombs discovered in the Valley of the Kings, held many of the many sons of Ramesses II. Egyptian temples were sometimes aligned so carefully that sunlight would touch a single inner shrine only on the solstice, a quiet yearly event. The royal title, Lord of the Two Lands, gently reminded every pharaoh of his duty to keep Upper and Lower Egypt calmly united as one. Egyptian art often showed the pharaoh raising a mace toward kneeling enemies, a symbolic image repeated softly for thousands of patient years. That same smiting pose first seen on the ancient Nama palette remained a powerful symbol of royal protection throughout the rest of Egyptian history. Egyptian gardens sometimes included small, quiet fish ponds, gently stocked with colourful fish for both beauty and the table. Egyptian beer was sometimes strained softly through cloth to remove bits of grain, refining the thick, nourishing brew before drinking. The goddess Satet, worshipped near Aswan, was linked closely to the yearly flood alongside Hapi, watching gently over the river's rise. Khnum, a ram-headed god, was believed to shape each new human being slowly and lovingly upon a quiet potter's wheel. Egyptian midwives assisted at most births, calling softly upon Meskenet and Taweret to help ensure a safe and gentle delivery. Wealthy Egyptian homes sometimes held a small private chapel tucked into a quiet corner, used for daily prayers and gentle offerings. Egyptian children often went without clothing through the heat of summer, comfortable and cool until they grew a little older. A child's hair was sometimes shaved away except for one long lock, known tenderly as the lock of youth, kept until they came of age. And so the long Egyptian night settles once more, calm and complete, the river quiet beneath the stars, carrying you gently, softly, into sleep. Far to the west of the Nile Valley lies the Siwa Oasis, an isolated green pocket in the desert where Alexander the Great once travelled to consult the powerful oracle of Amun. The journey to Siwa crossed brutal stretches of open desert, and ancient sources claim an entire Persian army sent to destroy the oracle vanished without a trace along the way. North of Siwa, the White Desert reveals strange chalk formations carved by wind into pale, ghostly shapes, rising from the sand like frozen waves. Not far away, the Black Desert is scattered with dark volcanic hills, dusted in a fine layer of basalt that gives the landscape its somber, smoky color. The ancient quarry route through the Wadi Hammamat cut directly across the eastern desert, linking the Nile to the Red Sea and carrying expeditions in search of fine stone. Travelers along that same desert road left behind carved rock inscriptions, brief messages and prayers scratched into the stone by passing soldiers, miners, and officials. At Hatnub, deep in the desert, ancient quarrymen extracted prized alabaster, a smooth, glowing stone favoured for fine vessels and the most delicate royal statues. On the shores of the Red Sea, the ancient harbour of Mersa Gawasis once launched expeditions bound for the distant land of Punt, its dry sands later preserving the dismantled timbers of entire ships. Those ship timbers, buried for thousands of years in caves above the harbour, were carefully numbered and stored, ready to be reassembled for the next long voyage south. Inland in the fertile Fayum Depression, the pharaoh Amenemhat III oversaw a vast irrigation project, channeling Nile water into the natural basin known to the Greeks as Lake Moeris. The Fayum's expanded farmland turned the region into one of Egypt's most productive agricultural centers, feeding communities that thrived for centuries around the lake's shifting shoreline. At Shadit, the city the Greeks would later call Crocodilopolis, a sacred crocodile believed to embody the god, Sobek was kept and fed by priests inside the temple precinct. Greek visitors recorded that this sacred crocodile, sometimes called Petsuchos, wore golden rings on its claws and was treated with the same reverence shown to royalty. Near Hawara, Amenemhat III built a pyramid from mud brick rather than solid stone, a structure that has worn down far more heavily than its older stone predecessors. The historian Herodotus described a vast maze-like building near this same site, a structure later writers called the labyrinth, filled with countless chambers and winding passageways. The Nile crocodile, an apex predator capable of growing well beyond 5 meters in length, moved silently through the river's currents, feared and worshipped in equal measure. Hippopotamuses, despite their plant-based diet, were considered among the most dangerous animals along the Nile, capable of overturning boats with a single, sudden movement. The sacred ibis, a slender white bird linked closely to the god Thoth, waded through marshes and shallow pools, its image carved endlessly into temple walls. The dung beetle, small and unassuming, became one of Egypt's most powerful religious symbols. Its habit of rolling balls of dung across the sand echoed in the myth of the sun rolling across the sky. Papyrus reeds once grew in dense towering thickets along the Nile's banks, providing material for boats, baskets, sandals, and the writing surface that would carry Egyptian civilization's words forward. The blue Egyptian lotus, prized in art and ritual, was not technically a lotus at all, but a variety of water lily, its petals opening with the morning sun and closing again at dusk. The native sycamore fig tree was closely associated with the goddess Hathor, its broad shade and sweet fruit offering comfort in tomb paintings, depicting the cool, peaceful afterlife. Acacia wood, hardy and locally available, was used for everyday furniture and boats, while costlier imported cedar was reserved for the finest coffins and temple doors. Donkeys served as Egypt's primary pack animals for most of its ancient history, hauling goods across desert tracts long before camels became common in later periods. Horses and chariots arrived in Egypt during the turbulent Second Intermediate Period, introduced through contact with peoples from Western Asia, and quickly transformed Egyptian warfare. By the New Kingdom, the chariot had become a central weapon of Egyptian military power, carrying an archer and driver swiftly across open battlefields. Egyptian armies relied on a mix of infantry, archers, and chariot units, often supported by composite bows adopted from neighboring cultures in the Near East. Soldiers carried curved bronze swords known as kopesh, their sickle-shaped blades designed for slashing strikes in close combat. Shields were built from tough cowhide stretched tightly over a wooden frame, light enough to carry yet sturdy enough to deflect arrows and blows. Nubian archers, known as the Medjay, served as skilled mercenary soldiers within the Egyptian military, prized for their accuracy and discipline in battle. Over time, the term Medjay shifted in meaning, eventually coming to describe an elite force of desert scouts and guards stationed near the Valley of the Kings. The vizier stood as the pharaoh's most powerful official, overseeing daily governance, the courts, the treasury, and the vast machinery of the Egyptian state. Egypt itself was divided into administrative provinces called nomes, each one governed by an official known as a nomarch, answering ultimately to the crown. This gnome system endured for thousands of years, shifting slightly in number and boundary, but remaining the backbone of Egyptian regional government across many dynasties. Periodic cattle counts were carried out across the kingdom, a careful census used to calculate taxes owed by farmers and herders alike. At Saqqara, beneath the shadow of the step pyramid, a vast underground gallery known as the Serapeum once held the mummified remains of sacred Apis bulls in massive stone sarcophagi. Each Apis bull upon its death was mourned with elaborate state ceremony, and a new bull bearing the correct sacred markings was sought out across the land to take its place. The step pyramid complex of Diosa included a vast ceremonial court built for a ritual called the Hebsed, meant to renew the pharaoh's strength and right to rule. Hatshepsut commissioned towering granite obelisks for the temple at Karnak, monuments so massive that one still stands today as the tallest surviving obelisk in Egypt. After Hatshepsut's death, her successor Thutmose III ordered many of her images and inscriptions chiseled away, an act of deliberate erasure historians call damnatio memoriae. Despite that attempt at erasure, enough of Hatshepsut's monuments survived to reveal the full scope of her ambitious building projects centuries later. At Amarna, archaeologists uncovered a remarkable archive of clay tablets written in cuneiform script, diplomatic letters exchanged between Egyptian pharaohs and foreign kings. These Amarna letters reveal a complex web of ancient diplomacy, including royal marriages, urgent requests for gold, and warnings of unrest among Egypt's distant vassal states. Egyptian pharaohs frequently sealed alliances through marriage to foreign princesses, including brides sent from the powerful kingdom of Mitanni in northern Mesopotamia. Egypt's long rivalry with the Hittite Empire eventually gave way to careful diplomacy, with royal correspondence describing requests for medical aid during a deadly plague that struck the Hittite court. During the reign of Rameses III, waves of seafaring raiders known as the Sea Peoples threatened Egypt's borders by land and water alike. Egyptian forces met this threat head-on at the Battle of the Delta, a fierce naval engagement recorded in vivid detail on the walls of Medinet Habu. Reliefs from that battle show Egyptian archers raining arrows down onto enemy ships from the riverbank, turning the Nile itself into a defensive weapon. In the centuries following Rameses III's reign, Egyptian central authority gradually weakened, ushering in what historians now call the Third Intermediate Period. During this fractured era, the high priests of Amun at Thebes grew so powerful that they effectively ruled southern Egypt as kings in their own right. Further north, a line of pharaohs descended from Libyan settlers rose to power during the 22nd dynasty, founded by a ruler named Shoshenq I. Some historians have linked Shoshenq's military campaigns into the Levant with a ruler named Shishak, mentioned in later biblical accounts of the period. Centuries later, the Scythe pharaoh Psamtik I managed to reunify a fractured Egypt, ushering in a brief but notable cultural revival known as the Late Period. According to the historian Herodotus, Psamtik's successor, Necho II, commissioned an expedition that may have circumnavigated the entire continent of Africa by sea. That same expedition, if the accounts are accurate, would have taken Egyptian sailors years to complete, returning home through the Strait of Gibraltar from the opposite direction. In 525 BCE, the Persian king Cambyses II conquered Egypt, ending centuries of native rule and folding the kingdom into the vast Persian Empire. Egypt briefly regained independence from Persian control before being reconquered decades later, a cycle of resistance and submission that shaped the final centuries of pharaonic history. Nectanebo II, the last native Egyptian to rule as pharaoh, was eventually driven from power, marking the symbolic end of 3,000 years of indigenous kingship. Following the conquests of Alexander the Great, Egypt entered a new chapter under Greek-speaking rulers who carefully adopted the old pharaonic symbols of power. Egypt under Roman rule became one of the empire's most vital grain suppliers, its harvests shipped north to help feed the enormous population of the city of Rome. Roman writers described Egypt almost as a treasure chamber, its temples, monuments, and traditions already considered ancient wonders by their own time. Long before any of this, during the Old Kingdom, Memphis served as Egypt's first great capital, strategically placed where the Nile Valley opens into the wide delta. Memphis remained a major religious and administrative center for thousands of years, even as the political capital of Egypt shifted elsewhere over time. The hieroglyphic sign for a vulture, perched and watchful, represented a particular sound in Egyptian writing, quietly distinct from the simpler reed leaf symbol used nearby. As wetlands shrank and habitats changed over the centuries, the sacred ibis eventually vanished from the Egyptian landscape entirely, surviving today only in distant regions further south. Egyptian shipwrights built vessels for river travel and for daring sea voyages alike, adapting their methods depending on whether they faced the Nile's calm current or the open Red Sea. The eastern desert's mountains held veins of gold that Egyptian miners extracted using simple stone tools, crushing ore by hand to separate the precious metal. Expedition leaders recorded their journeys into these remote mining regions on stone stele, leaving behind brief but vivid accounts of distances traveled and hardships endured. Egyptian engineers cut massive stone blocks at quarries using nothing but copper chisels, wooden wedges, and the patient application of water to swell and split the rock. Some blocks were transported across the desert on wooden sledges dragged over wetted sand to reduce friction, a technique illustrated in surviving tomb paintings. The Aswan region supplied much of Egypt's finest granite, its reddish stone prized for obelisks, statues, and the heavy sarcophagi found within royal tombs. Sandstone quarried extensively in the south became the primary building material for many of the great temples constructed during the New Kingdom. Limestone, more common and easier to work than granite, formed the core of most pyramids, later finished with a smoother, costlier outer casing. Egyptian builders used simple A-frame levels and plumb lines to check that towering walls and columns rose perfectly straight against gravity's pull. Surveying tools allowed ancient engineers to lay out entire temple complexes with remarkable precision, aligning structures carefully toward the rising or setting sun. At certain temples, architects calculated sightlines so exact that the sun's first light would strike a sacred inner statue only on specific, predictable mornings of the year. Egyptian builders left behind quarry marks, simple painted symbols indicating which crew had cut each block, a quiet trace of organized ancient labor still visible today. Skilled stonemasons worked in teams, often passing knowledge down through families across many generations, a tradition of craftsmanship lasting centuries. Egyptian copper tools required frequent sharpening and recasting, since the soft metal dulled quickly against the harder stones it was used to shape. Bronze, a stronger alloy of copper and tin, gradually replaced pure copper tools during the Middle Kingdom, improving the efficiency of carving and construction. The introduction of iron tools came relatively late to Egypt compared to other ancient civilizations, with bronze remaining dominant for many additional centuries. Egyptian engineers built dikes and embankments to manage the unpredictable swings of the Nile flood, protecting villages from both drought and sudden inundation. Flood records kept at river measuring stations allowed officials to estimate, with surprising accuracy, how successful or difficult the coming harvest season might be. In years when the flood failed to rise sufficiently, granary reserves built up over previous seasons became the difference between stability and serious famine. The Egyptian state organized large labor forces not only for monuments but also for canal digging, embankment repair, and other essential public infrastructure projects. Skilled and unskilled workers alike could be conscripted for limited periods of state labor, a system historians often compare to a structured form of national service. Despite popular myths, evidence increasingly shows that monumental construction projects relied on organized, motivated labor forces rather than masses of enslaved captives. Egyptian administrators kept meticulous written records of labor assignments, rations distributed, and project timelines, offering modern historians a surprisingly detailed window into ancient bureaucracy. Egyptian scribes trained for years to master both practical accounting and the more elaborate, decorative hieroglyphic script used for monuments and religious texts. Literacy rates in ancient Egypt remained relatively low overall, with formal reading and writing skills concentrated mainly among scribes, priests, and certain officials. Egyptian society nonetheless valued the written word so deeply that even illiterate individuals might keep inscribed amulets, trusting in the protective power of words they could not read themselves. Trade caravans crossing the eastern desert connected the Nile Valley to Red Sea ports, carrying incense, exotic woods, and rare stones back toward the river. Camels, now closely associated with Egyptian desert travel, were not widely used as pack animals until centuries later than most of pharaonic history, arriving gradually through later trade contacts. Egyptian seafarers ventured along the eastern Mediterranean coast for trade and diplomacy, their ships recognizable by their distinctive curved hulls and woven rigging. Coastal cities along the Levant maintained close trading relationships with Egypt for centuries, exchanging timber, dyes, and manufactured goods for Egyptian grain and gold. Egyptian influence extended culturally as well as economically, with Egyptian-style amulets and artistic motifs discovered far beyond the kingdom's own borders. Archaeological surveys continue today across Egypt's deserts and river valley, regularly uncovering new tombs, settlements, and inscriptions that quietly reshape historians' understanding of the past. To the ancient Egyptians, the pharaoh was far more than a king. He was believed to be a divine figure who acted as a bridge between humanity and the gods. The pharaoh's responsibilities included maintaining order, ensuring the gods were honored, and protecting Egypt from chaos. His authority was considered sacred, and obedience to the ruler was often seen as a religious duty. The Egyptians believed that death was not an end but a transition into another stage of existence. Because of this belief, they devoted tremendous resources to preparing tombs, preserving bodies, and gathering possessions for the journey ahead. Wealthy Egyptians filled their burial chambers with furniture, jewelry, food, clothing, and even games, believing these items would be needed in the next world. Creating a mummy required remarkable skill and patience. Priests carefully removed internal organs, dried the body using natron salt, wrapped it in layers of linen, and performed religious ceremonies throughout the process. The goal was to preserve the body so the spirit could recognize it in the afterlife. This practice became one of the most famous traditions of ancient Egypt and lasted for thousands of years. Carved from a single mass of limestone, the Great Sphinx features the body of a lion and the head of a human ruler. Historians believe it was constructed during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre around 2500 BCE. Despite centuries of wind, sand, and erosion, the monument still watches over the pyramids. Many mysteries remain about its original appearance and purpose. Egyptian hieroglyphs combined images, sounds, and symbols into a sophisticated writing system. Skilled scribes spent years mastering thousands of signs used to record everything from royal decrees to religious texts. For centuries, nobody could understand these inscriptions until the discovery of the Rosetta Stone helped scholars decode the ancient language in the 19th century. Unlike modern places of worship, Egyptian temples were considered actual residences for divine beings. Priests performed daily rituals inside sacred chambers, offering food, incense, and prayers to statues representing the gods. Ordinary people rarely entered the deepest parts of these temples. The structures themselves were designed to symbolize the creation of the universe and the connection between heaven and earth. For many years, people believed the pyramids were built by vast armies of slaves. Archaeological discoveries tell a different story. Evidence suggests that many workers were skilled laborers who received food, housing, medical care, and compensation. Entire communities were organized around these enormous construction projects, demonstrating the remarkable administrative abilities of the Egyptian state. Cats protected grain supplies by hunting rodents and snakes, making them valuable companions. Over time, they became associated with divine protection and were linked to the goddess Bastet. Many families treated cats with great affection, and harming one could bring severe punishment. Some cats were even mummified and buried with their owners. Egyptian physicians treated wounds, set broken bones, and performed basic surgical procedures. Medical texts reveal detailed observations about illnesses and injuries. Although some treatments relied on magic and religious rituals, many others were based on practical experience. Their knowledge influenced later civilizations and represents one of the earliest recorded medical traditions. Across the Nile Valley, massive temples, statues, obelisks, and tombs demonstrated the civilization's engineering achievements. Structures such as Karnak and Luxor required generations of labor to complete. These monuments were not only displays of power, but also expressions of religious belief, designed to endure for eternity. Ancient Egyptian women could own property, inherit wealth, conduct business, and even initiate divorce. While society was still largely dominated by men, women enjoyed legal protections that were uncommon elsewhere in the ancient world. Some rose to extraordinary positions of influence, including the famous female pharaoh Hatshepsut. Ascending the throne around 1479 BCE, Hatshepsut ruled during a period of peace and prosperity. She sponsored ambitious building projects and expanded trade networks across the region. To strengthen her authority, she often portrayed herself in royal imagery traditionally associated with male pharaohs. Her reign demonstrated that effective leadership could transcend traditional expectations. Egyptian merchants exchanged gold, papyrus, grain, and luxury goods with neighboring kingdoms. Trade expeditions traveled across deserts, seas, and foreign territories in search of valuable resources. These connections brought exotic materials such as incense, ebony, ivory, and precious stones into Egypt, enriching both its economy and culture. Advances in scientific analysis, from CT scanning to DNA testing, have allowed modern researchers to study royal mummies without ever disturbing their ancient wrappings. These modern techniques have revealed new details about ancient diet, disease, and even family relationships among Egypt's long line of pharaohs. And as the long history of the Nile fades quietly into darkness, the past settles into stillness once more, leaving you resting peacefully in its ancient, timeless shadow. Around 3100 BCE, the kingdoms of Upper and Lower Egypt were united under a single ruler, often identified as Nama. This unification marked the beginning of one of the longest-lasting civilizations in human history. The pharaoh was more than a king. Egyptians believed their ruler served as a bridge between humanity and the gods, maintaining balance and harmony throughout the land. The well-being of the kingdom was thought to depend upon the pharaoh's ability to fulfill this sacred role. One of the most important concepts in Egyptian thought was Ma'at, the principle of truth, justice, balance, and cosmic order. Egyptians believed that every action, from governing a kingdom to conducting a simple trade, should contribute to maintaining this universal harmony. Rising from the Giza Plateau, the Great Pyramid of Giza remains one of the most extraordinary engineering achievements ever completed. Built approximately 4,500 years ago, it originally stood covered in smooth white limestone that reflected the sunlight across the desert. Contrary to popular myths, the pyramids were not constructed by vast armies of enslaved people. Archaeological discoveries suggest that many workers were skilled laborers who received food, housing, medical treatment, and recognition for their efforts. The builders of the pyramids moved enormous stone blocks weighing several tons each. Even today, scholars continue to study exactly how these stones were transported and lifted into place with the technology available at the time. Guarding the pyramids is the Great Sphinx of Giza, a colossal monument carved from limestone. With the body of a lion and the head of a human, it has silently watched over the desert landscape for thousands of years. Ancient Egyptian writing, known as hieroglyphics, combined art and language into a single system. Elaborate symbols representing animals, people, and objects were carved onto temple walls and painted onto papyrus scrolls to record everything from religious texts to government records. Becoming a scribe required years of training. Because few people could read or write, scribes occupied an important place in society. Their work preserved laws, managed taxes, and documented the events of the kingdom. Papyrus, one of Egypt's most valuable inventions, was made from a reed that grew along the Nile. Sheets were pressed together to create a writing surface that could be rolled into scrolls and transported across great distances. Temples in ancient Egypt were considered the homes of the gods. Priests performed daily rituals inside sacred chambers, offering food, incense, and prayers to divine statues that were treated as living embodiments of the deities. The sun god Ra occupied a central place in Egyptian religion. Many believed he traveled across the sky each day in a solar boat and journeyed through the underworld each night, before rising again at dawn. Cats held a special status in Egyptian society. Their ability to protect grain stores from mice and snakes made them valuable companions, and over time they became associated with protection, fertility, and divine favor. Ancient Egyptians paid great attention to personal appearance. Both men and women used perfumes, oils, and cosmetics, while dark eye makeup made from minerals helped reduce the glare of the bright desert sun. Bread and beer formed the foundation of the Egyptian diet. Workers, farmers, and even officials often received portions of grain that could be baked into bread or brewed into a thick, nutritious beverage consumed throughout the day. As evening settled over the Nile Valley, musicians entertained guests with harps, flutes, and drums. Music accompanied festivals, religious ceremonies, and family gatherings, filling the warm Egyptian nights with rhythm and song. The jackal-headed god Anubis guided souls through the process of death. Priests performing mummification rituals often wore masks resembling him. His image became closely linked with tombs and funerary rites. Egyptians believed the soul consisted of several spiritual components. Preserving the body helped ensure these elements could reunite after death. This belief inspired the elaborate practice of mummification. Mummification was a long and careful process. Embalmers removed moisture from the body using natron salt. Over many weeks, they prepared the deceased for eternity. Internal organs were often placed in specially crafted canopic jars. Each jar was protected by a divine guardian. Together, they formed an important part of the burial ritual. The heart usually remained inside the body. Egyptians believed it was the center of intelligence, memory, and emotion. In the afterlife, it would be judged. According to tradition, the heart was weighed against a feather representing truth. A balanced heart indicated a life lived according to Mayat. An unworthy heart faced a darker fate. The famous funerary text, known as the Book of the Dead, was not a single book. Instead, it consisted of collections of spells and guidance. These texts were intended to help the deceased navigate the afterlife. Tombs were carefully designed homes for eternity. Their walls depicted scenes of idealized daily life. Egyptians hoped these images would become reality in the next world. Many tomb paintings retain their colors even after thousands of years. Dry desert conditions slowed their deterioration. As a result, modern viewers can still glimpse the artistic vision of ancient craftsmen. Ancient Egyptian artists followed strict conventions. Figures were often shown with heads in profile and torsos facing forward. This style remained remarkably consistent for centuries. Gold held special significance in Egypt. Associated with the flesh of the gods, it symbolized eternity and divine power. The deserts and mines of Egypt provided abundant supplies. Jewelry was worn not only for beauty but also for protection. Amulets were believed to possess magical properties. Many were buried alongside their owners. Cats became highly valued throughout Egyptian society. Their ability to control pests protected grain supplies. Over time, they came to be associated with sacred qualities. The goddess Bastet was often depicted as a cat or lioness. She represented protection, fertility, and domestic harmony. Her festivals attracted large numbers of worshippers. Dogs, monkeys, birds, and other animals were also kept as companions. Some pets received burials of their own. The bond between humans and animals was deeply woven into Egyptian life. Most Egyptians worked as farmers. Their lives followed the rhythms of the Nile. Planting, growing, and harvesting shaped the agricultural calendar. Bread formed the foundation of the Egyptian diet. It came in many shapes and varieties. Grain production was central to the kingdom's prosperity. Beer was consumed daily by people of many social classes. Unlike modern beer, it was often thick and nutritious. It provided both calories and hydration. Dates, figs, onions, garlic, fish, and vegetables were common foods. The Nile supported a rich ecosystem that helped feed the population. Seasonal abundance was celebrated with festivals. Egyptian homes were usually built from mud brick rather than stone. While temples and tombs survived for millennia, ordinary houses gradually returned to the earth from which they were made. The wealthiest Egyptians often wore finely woven linen garments. The lightweight fabric helped keep them cool beneath the hot desert sun. Cosmetics were used by both men and women. Dark eye paint reduced glare and may have helped protect against certain eye infections. Perfumes and scented oils played an important role in personal grooming. Fragrance was associated with purity and divine favor. Many wealthy Egyptians shaved their heads and wore wigs. This helped them stay cool while maintaining fashionable appearances. Children spent much of their time helping their families learn practical skills. Education varied greatly depending on social status. Music filled Egyptian life. Harps, flutes, drums, and rattles accompanied festivals, ceremonies, and celebrations. Dancing often accompanied religious rituals. Movement was considered another way of honoring the gods. One popular board game was Senet. Players moved pieces across a decorated board, and some believed the game symbolized a journey through the afterlife. Ancient Egyptian doctors possessed surprisingly advanced medical knowledge. They treated wounds, fractures, and illnesses with a mixture of practical observation and spiritual remedies. And now, let your thoughts travel even further back. Thousands of years ago, along the winding Nile, the people of ancient Egypt built great temples, carved their stories into stone, and looked to the same stars that twinkle above you tonight. They honored the sun, the river, and the mysteries of life and death, trusting in a world larger than themselves. And still, their pyramids rise from the sands, their words remain on the walls, and their legacy lives on. You are connected to them just as you are to every story that came before. Rest now. Let the wisdom of the ages wrap around you like a gentle embrace. Good night.